Today we are talking about a leaked alien autopsy report that reveals the alien religion. I know that sounds kind of wild, but stick with me here. This is some really interesting stuff. So this was actually fairly recent that this alien autopsy report was leaked, and I actually had someone that follows me notify me about this, and I saw that there were a lot of videos being put out about this, and I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly who it was, so if you're watching this, thank you, but I'm sorry, I just can't remember your username, but someone alerted me to this. Like I said, this was fairly recently, and so this gets into not only, like I said, the physical makeup of these supposed beings, but also what I find really fascinating, the religion of these creatures or aliens, or what we'll see they call EBOs, and we'll see why they call them EBOs in a moment. Now, I wanted to talk about this because there are a lot of interesting parallels between this EBO religion and what we talk about on this channel, and how we know and understand reality to work. And that's exactly what piqued my interest and why I want to talk about this with you. Now, of course, the big question is it real or is it a hoax? So, of course, we're going to be taking a look at this with logic and reason as well, and not only looking into the details of this, but discovering whether this is real or whether it's a hoax and what we should think about it. Or, of course, what you should think about it, but I will give you my opinion on it. So, let's dive right into it. But before I do, I just want to say, as always, hey, please like and subscribe. It helps get information out there. And we're trying to create a new beginning, a new earth, a new consciousness, and a new humanity. And it spreads when you spread these videos. Tells the algorithm to spread this information around. It's important. So also what I want to say is look out for comments in the on my videos from scammers pretending to be me. There's a lot of people pretending to be me, saying I have a WhatsApp and a Telegram and all that stuff. Watch out for that. It's a bunch of bullshit. Don't follow it. Also, there are people and groups out there who don't like what I'm doing and who don't like what we're doing. They don't want this information to get out there. So be aware that there are people and groups spreading a lot of misinformation and disinformation about me and what we're doing here. So as always, don't fall for the BS. Use logic, use reason. Okay, so let's jump right into this. This is something that's very interesting. So let's see. So what's going on here? So here's the idea. About a month ago, this post appeared on Reddit, supposedly being a leaked alien autopsy report from an individual putting out this information. And this individual put out this information, and then very quickly their comments started getting deleted, and then their entire account was deleted because they were answering questions and things like that. Their comments started getting deleted, then their account was deleted, and this all happened pretty quickly. So I took a look at this and I was like, okay, interesting, whatever. The reason why I want to take a look at with you right now is because in this report, like I said, it talks about this supposed alien religion, which shares a lot of parallels with what we talk about on my channel. Now, the question is this real or is it not? Here's the thing. I'll tell you exactly what I think at the end. But I'll tell you what I think at the end. Okay, there's some very interesting things here. I'll lay it out for you, and then I'll give you my opinion at the end. But like I said, the main thing I want to discuss is the so-called alien religion. Very interesting stuff. So let me just bring this up real quick, and this is a very long report, by the way, but we're not going to go through the whole thing. It's very long and very technical. We're going to look at some of the highlights though, but what I want to share with you, okay, so this was this post that appeared, like I said, it appeared on Reddit. The individual's account was deleted. And so it says, from the late 2000s to the mid 2010s, I worked as a molecular biologist for a national security contractor in a program to study exobiospheric organisms, or EBOs. I will share with you a lot of information on this subject. Feel free to ask questions for clarification. So, like I said, they were interacting in the comments for a while, answering questions, things like this. And stick with me here because I'm going to show you why I wanted to talk about this to you and exactly what's interesting about this. So, just it'll all unfold and connect in a moment. So yeah, the first thing he says, or they say, it seems like all my comments are being deleted. I will post answers at the end of this message. So it starts off by saying, for the late, right. I was a contractor, molecular biologist, etc. The aim of the program was to elucidate the genome and proteome basis of these organisms. Although the study of OBCs has been going on for decades in other programs, new high throughput DNA sequencing technologies of the late 90s unblocked stagnant research in this area, etc., etc. There's a lot of technical information. What we've learned so far has enabled us to outline some disconcerting perspectives about our place in this universe. Briefly, we've discovered that the EBO genome is a chimera of genomes from our biospheres and from an unknown one. They are artificial, ephemeral, and disposable organisms created for a purpose that still partially eludes us. I'll be substaining my statements after a brief introduction. Okay, so this is important to keep in mind as we discuss, because this is going to connect with their so-called religion. These EBOs that they're studying, he's saying from his studies, they've determined that these organisms are disposable and created for a certain purpose. So they're not, they are disposable organisms created for a specific purpose. And the reason why that's well, you'll see why this connects in a moment. Anyway, the post continues, the reason for disclosing these secrets is quite simple. I believe that every human being has the right to know the truth, and that to process, humanity needs to divest itself of certain institutions and organizations that will probably not survive these revelations in the long term. I'm aware that I have very little impact in this regard, but I still believe that small leaks are necessary to break the dam of misinformation on this subject. When the government will eventually reveal these secrets, there will undoubtedly be a societal upheaval, but in my opinion, the longer we wait, the worse it will be. I choose to divulge what I know anonymously out of selfishness for the well-being of myself and my family. I'm aware that this diminishes the reach and credibility of my message, but it's the furthest I am willing to go. I choose this forum because it offers a good compromise between anonymity and popularity. In order to protect my anonymity, I will be purposefully vague or even contradictory about any information that could identify me, such as date, education, role, etc. I'll even introduce red herrings in this respect. I want to make it clear that any information related to the subject of research will not be treated in this way. So he's basically saying, hey, I'm going to lie in this, but just so you know, the things that I'm going to lie about are anything that has to do with me, to throw anyone off who would perhaps not like me saying these things. But the actual information regarding the EBOs themselves, he's saying he's going to be truthful, supposedly. So before going any further, please excuse me if you find it difficult to understand what I'm explaining. Some parts of my text are very technical. It's difficult to find the right balance between vulgarization and scientific explanation. I'll continue by talking about myself. What's the point of talking about me, knowing that the information will be necessarily misleading? I simply want to introduce a perspective on the type of people who work there, normal scientists. I have a PhD in molecular biology. I didn't actively seek to be a part of this program. Rather, it was a stroke of luck that introduced me to one of the senior scientists. Anyway, he goes on to just explain basically how we got involved with this, the different interview processes that he went through. But the interesting thing that I want to, which we'll point out later, which will become important, is that he says that he spent a lot of time in an archive room reading about the subject of study. Hold on one moment. My packages always come when I'm live streaming, unless that's like, the CIA or whatever about to shut down this stream. Hopefully not. They probably wouldn't ring the doorbell if that were the case. Well, maybe they would. Maybe they're polite. I don't know. Anyway, so the important part that I want to mention that's important for what we're talking about today is that he says that he spent a lot of time researching information that they provided him, and these documents are almost exclusive about the biology of the EBOs, but there are also a few that deal with other subjects such as their food, religion, or culture. There were no documents on their technology. Okay. So that's the important part. He was privy to information about their religion through the research materials he was given access to for this thing that he was a part of. Now, it goes on to talk about the genetics. It goes on to talk about it is actually quite technical. Now, if you want to go read this, you can. It gets into, very, very technical data with regard to DNA sequencing and things like this. But I'll give you a brief summary, okay? So I'll read you a summary of it because knowing a little bit about the physical aspect of the EBOs is related to the religion aspect that we're going to discuss. So the report suggests that these exobiospheric organisms aren't naturally evolved, all right? But rather that they're artificially created or engineered beings. So this is the idea. These beings, according to this autopsy report, they're not naturally evolved. They are artificially created for a purpose. So the EBO genome contains unique sequences called tripalindromic regions, and these sequences are not typically found in naturally evolved organisms on Earth, leading to speculation about their artificial origin. The presence of such sequences suggests a level of engineering or manipulation in their genetic material. The EBOs have biological limitations. They have a highly specific digestive system that can only process liquid nutrients. And this system suggests that they were designed for a very specific purpose or environment or set of conditions. They don't have any reproductive organs. They suggest that the EBOs are engineered, ephemeral, and disposable. And it's possible that they have an inability to live independently without some technological support. Let's see. So the conclusion, the speculative conclusion about this is that they seem to be alive artificially solely to accomplish a specific task. So they have a purpose-driven existence rather than a naturally evolved existence. So now let's talk about the aspect that how this connects to, and like I said, if you want to know more about the physical makeup of that's described in this autopsy, you can. It's quite long and quite technical, but those are the main points that are generated from this. Is that because of lack of genitals and certain functions of their biological makeup, they can only survive on liquid diet, etc. It seems like they're disposable, artificially created bodies. So let's scroll down a bit to where this individual. So, like I said, it's quite long. You can see it's, not super long, but fairly long. So this individual was answering questions, and so one question person asked them, "I haven't read everything in detail, but can you expand on their religion, on the document on their religion?" And so okay, coming from this individual. All right. So I'm going to read to you a bit about how he describes the religion. But keep in mind, and he even says this at the end, that what he's describing, because he's from their, let's say this is true. If this is true, they're claiming to be a molecular biologist. They're not a philosopher. They're not anyone who would be familiar with ideas put forth in this so-called religion. So, and he also says, this is a really long time ago. I'm not a philosopher. I'm doing my best, basically. So let's take a look at this and see what he says. So EBOs believe that the soul is not an extension of the individual, but rather a fundamental characteristic of nature that expresses itself as a field, not unlike gravity. And there's more here, but let's break this down a little bit. Okay, first of all, that's very interesting. So first of all, they believe in the soul. They believe that the soul exists. They believe that the soul is not an extension of the individual. doesn't come from the person, doesn't come from the individual, but that it's a fundamental characteristic of nature. Basically, that the soul is a fundamental aspect of existence, and it expresses itself as a field. Now, coming from, let's say, someone who's doing their best to describe this, not as a philosopher, this is interesting, and it comes very, very close so far to how we understand reality to be. So we look at reality as being mind. And so soul and mind in philosophy are basically used interchangeably, or else at least they used to. Soul is the subjective element of, so you would be a soul. Your mind, your subjectivity, that is what soul is. So to say that the soul is a fundamental aspect of existence is to say that mind or subjectivity is the fundamental aspect of existence. And so they're essentially saying that mind or soul or subjectivity is a fundamental aspect of existence, not an extension of the individual. So how we understand reality to be in our system is that reality is mind or frequency, and every single one of us are individual eternal minds, which we call zetas. So zetas or zetic minds are units of frequencies, beings of frequencies, frequencies of mind. They are an individual mind that contains an infinite energy within itself, and this infinite energy balances, voids out, or nets to zero. So a zeta is a triple concept. It's one, infinite, zero. It's a being of mathematical frequency. And so they describe soul as being fundamental to existence and a field. This is close to our understanding of reality being mind, and reality, physical reality, being a projection from a frequency domain, which you could consider a field of frequency, a frequency field. You can consider it. So this is quite close already. Interesting. So it says, in the presence of life, this field acquires complexity, resulting in negative entropy, if this makes sense. So they're saying in the presence of life, this soul field complexifies itself and orders itself into more complex and ordered structures. Again, close to what we talk about. We are individual, zetic minds, beings of frequency, and we are continuously ordering and transforming and evolving by altering our internal frequency patterns into more ordered and structured and optimal patterns. So, pretty close. So, this gain in complexity, the ordering of complexity of the soul, the mind, or in our terms, frequency, is directly correlated with the concentration of living organisms in a given location. So the more the more concentration of organisms relates to how this field complexifies itself. Now, let's see why. With time and with the right conditions, life in turn becomes more complex until the appearance of sentient life. After reaching this threshold, the field begins to express itself through these sentient beings, forming what we call the soul. All right, so very, very interesting. This individual is saying that there's this field, this soul-like field, that is ordering and complexifying itself, and that life, when bodies, when avatars reach a certain level of consciousness, when they reach a certain level, not really of consciousness, but they say the appearance of sentience, which is different. But anyway, this field expresses it through these beings. So in other words, this field expresses itself through bodies. And this is what they call the soul, this expression of this field through bodies. And this is, again, close to our position, which is reality, is frequency. Each and every one of us are individual, eternal minds or souls that we call zetas. And eternal minds or souls link to avatars, bodies, to be able to learn, grow, and experience. And as they learn, grow, and experience, this introduces more order, more complexity, and more optimization to our internal frequency structure. Why? Because we're learning. When we are, you can sort of think of it almost as like an AI system in training data. These bodies give us as minds training data in order to learn, grow, and optimize. Now, it's not exactly like AI, of course. It's a lot different. It's living, it's alive. AI is not living and alive. These are living frequencies. We are living frequencies. But it's similar. So, again, interesting, the similarity. And it says that, so the field begins to express itself through these beings, forming what we call the soul. Through their life experiences, sentient beings will in turn influence the field in a sort of feedback loop. So again, through these life experiences, sentient beings will in turn influence the field in a sort of positive feedback loop. This in turn further accelerates the complexity of the field. So basically what's saying here is that the experiences of the creature introduces further complexity to the soul field. Quite similar to what I just explained. Zetic minds linking to a body in order to learn, grow, and understand through life experiences is what adds and contributes to the complexity of you, me, us, all of us as evolving minds. That's what we're doing right here. Like right now, you're listening to me, you're having life experiences, and you are complexifying. You're internalizing this data, you're internalizing this information, and it might alter the way you perceive things. You might have come to new conclusions, new ideas. When you go out and, meet your friends and have an experience with your friends, when you, have a lover and have children, and all these different life experiences are giving you more data and information and emotions and experiences to evolve, grow, and learn. And this is essentially what this is being said here, that you have a positive feedback loop. And in our system, there absolutely is a positive feedback loop as well. Because why? You have a mind that is linked to a body, and this body is going and experiencing life, and this leads to the complexification of the mind. And the more that the mind complexifies, this leads to different choices that you do in the physical world. And this would contribute to, like, if we look in terms of evolution, this would be in terms of being a mental evolution and a physical evolution. So you can see in terms of evolution, if we're looking, just look at the broad spectrum of evolution. In terms of evolution, there's two kinds of evolution. There's physical evolution and there's mental evolution, or frequency evolution, or soul evolution, whatever you want to call it. I try and get away from words like soul and God, etc. But I'm just doing it because those are the words that they're using, and it's what they're meaning. So there's two types of evolution. There's physical evolution and mental evolution, and it influences each other. Why? Because, well, if you look at, beings, species, they are surviving, adapting, going extinct, etc. And through their experiences, the minds are evolving. Now, as minds link to avatars, the minds have gained more experiences and are thus able to navigate avatars better. So you have avatars being able to be pushed in a certain way that increases their adaptability and survival because of the increase and optimization of a mind. And this in turn leads to possible physical evolution, because now that species is surviving and leading to offspring, etc. So you have this feedback loop of physical evolution being tied to mental evolution, and it providing feedback loops, development of archetypal dynamics, development of instincts, development of body actual avatar transformations through physical evolution. So internally, you have archetypes being constructed, which are the patterns that lead to instincts, which lead to survival, which lead to adaptation, or adaptation leads to survival rather, and leads to the propagation of the species. And so you have this dynamic feedback loop. Anyway, it's similar, very, very similar. So just to reiterate, after reaching so the field begins to express itself through sentient beings, forming what we call the soul. Through their life experiences, sentient beings will in turn influence the field in a sort of positive feedback loop. This in turn accelerates the complexity of the field. Eventually, when the field reaches critical mass, there will be a sort of apotheosis. It's not clear what this means in practical terms, but this quest for apotheosis seems to be the EBO's main motivation. Okay, so this is what's very interesting. Again, very much in line with what we talk about, is that you are an eternal mind, and we talk about all the time that you are divine and you have the potential to become God. We all have the potential to become God. We are God expressing itself through bodies right now. We are the absolute experiencing itself through ourselves. So this apotheosis, what apotheosis mean is, apotheosis, if you don't know, means self-deification, or basically becoming God. So apotheosis means becoming God. It's saying eventually when the field reaches a critical mass, there will be a apotheosis, or a becoming of God. It's not clear what this means in practical terms, but this quest for becoming of God, or apotheosis, seems to be the EBO's main motivation. And so this is, again, very similar to what we talk about, is that as minds evolve and complexify, this is the whole point of what we're doing. What we're doing is to increase consciousness to the level of hyper-awareness. For what? Apotheosis. For you and everyone and all minds to realize that they are the absolute expressing itself. So, this goes back to the banned Gospel of Thomas that basically says, when you realize that you are God, you will become God. I'm very much paraphrasing a lot here, but that's the basic message here, is that the kingdom of heaven is all around you and it's within you. It's up to you if you can see it. You are God when you remember that you are God, when you realize that you are God. And this takes a level of consciousness, or a field reaching critical mass, you could say, for it to be able to click. And you go, oh, wow, that's right. I'm the absolute, experiencing myself in diversity. And in that realization, you have apotheosis. You can achieve apotheosis through the realization of what you are. And this is essentially what we're trying to get humanity to do, to reach the next level of evolution. We're in phase 1 right now, survival. And the survival, and see, this is why a lot of this matches up very nicely, is that the survival phase of evolution is with regard to just simply developing an avatar that can support consciousness with the capacity to complexify itself. So the first whole phase, there's 3 phases to existence: survival, planetary civilization, and holos independence. So the 3 phases, the first phase is survival. That's simply to develop an avatar that's able to host a Zedic mind that has the capacity and functionality and adaptability to eventually have self-awareness, consciousness, and reach hyper-awareness. See, humanity has developed self-awareness, and it's really like, do you think that that's the end of the line? Like, you can see animals and they're instinctual. We're self-aware, and we can say, oh, look, animals are instinctual. They're not at the level of consciousness that we are. Now, animals are great. I love animals. They can have emotions, they can have feelings, and they have a degree of awareness, absolutely. But clearly we have a degree higher. We can plan for the future, we can recall memories on demand, we can create governments and institutions. Obviously our consciousness is of a higher degree. So I'm not bashing on animals at all. I love animals. I'm a transitional vegan. So animals are fantastic. But obviously we're at a higher level of consciousness, and we can look at animals and we can recognize that. Clearly, the level of consciousness that humanity is at is not the highest level. Clearly, there's a higher level, and that level is hyper-awareness, and is exactly what we're trying to get humanity to achieve collectively. And hyper-awareness entails apotheosis, realizing that we are God, in that we're realizing that we are an interconnected dynamic structure engaged in a feedback loop that is experiencing itself through itself. And that is a process of our internal complexification, is realizing that we are God. So essentially, what this is saying is that this apotheosis seems to be what the EBOs are interested in. So the writer continues, the author of this document, because remember, the individual who's writing this post is not the one who created the document on religion. According to this individual is the molecular biologist. He was involved with the physical aspect. When it came to the religion aspect, he read a document in these archives in the research center or the archive center. So this information is coming from information that he recalled from a document that someone else, another researcher, wrote. So he says the author of the document added his reflections and interpretations as an appendix. He specified that for them, the soul field is not a belief, but an obvious truth. So for the EBOs, this soul field isn't a belief. So it's not a religion. And, you know, I think that him calling it a religion, or I don't know if they mentioned their gender, but they are not, you know, correct in saying it's a religion, I would say, because for these EBOs, the existence of the soul field isn't a belief. It says for them, it's not a belief, but an obvious truth. And this is also something that's very fitting to what we talk about, because the existence of a domain beyond matter, a metaphysical domain, a domain that precedes matter and gives rise to matter, is obviously true. The subjectivity, sentience, mind is not something that can be generated. It is something that eternally exists and is what we are. And so for these creatures, you know, for these EBOs, whatever they're calling them, it's not like they have this belief. For them, it's just the nature of reality. It's like, oh yeah, this field exists and it's complexifying and ordering itself through the experiences of entities, bodies. He also argues that the soul loses its individuality after death, but that the memory and experiences persists as part of the field. Okay, now this is where it takes a little bit of a departure. This is where it takes more of a Buddhist rather than Hindu aspect of an Atman rather than Atman. So according to this, it says the soul loses its individuality after death, but that the memory and experiences persist as a part of the field. Now, this is really interesting because let's say this is true, right? Let's say this is true. I could see that as being a misinterpretation because, of course, this is very detailed and advanced information. And okay, so let me just tell you our position. So our position is that we are eternal Zedic minds. And so when the avatar or the body dies, your individuality does persist. You are not tied to that ego anymore. So you exist as an eternal being of frequencies that has the data that it has acquired across many lifetimes. So let me explain a little bit of a difference. Basically, what they are saying is that the soul uses bodies to acquire data. When the body dies, individuality ceases to be, but that data acquired exists within the soul field. So that is a bit different than our position, which is that we are eternal beings of frequencies, Zedic minds. We are eternal Zetas, and at linking to bodies, we acquire information and data. When the body dies, our individuality persists, and the information that we acquired persists within us, but we exist within a network of Zedic minds, and our complexification leads to the complexification of the network of Zedic minds itself, which leads to the complexification of the entire network, which is the absolute network, which is God experiencing itself. So our system is a bit more nuanced, and they're basically saying, hey, there's just a big old soul field. This soul field experiences through bodies, and when the data is acquired, individuality ceases to persist, but the entire soul field complexifies itself. Ours is different. Ours is that we are eternal Zedic minds that exist as a network, and individual Zedic minds are acquiring experiences and persist in individuality, but that complexification of the individual also leads to the complexification of the network. So our meta-rationalist model in the Neogenian system is like a neural network. This system is not like a neural network, what they're talking about. Our system is like a neural network. It's like how the brain functions, and that you have a brain that consists of neurons, individual neurons, or like an artificial or an AI. In AI, you have the AI network itself that is composed of various nodes and various layers. So an AI system is, you have the AI system itself, the artificial neural network. So you have the artificial neural network. Within the artificial neural network, there are different nodes. These nodes are all linked together and interact and pass information through different layers, which leads to the complexity of the entire network itself. That's much more similar to our position, which we are individual Zedic minds that exist as the network. Like a brain has neurons or an AI has nodes, the absolute is a Zedic configuration. And this Zedic configuration is optimizing itself through the nodal experiences that it has. So their position is more like a big old pool, and our position is a network of minds complexifying itself. Because this is so... And let me explain why as well. So reality is the absolute experiencing itself. At the beginning of space and time, this is an eternal process, but reality has cycles, cosmic cycles of the physical universe. Reality itself is eternal, but the physical universe goes through cycles. So at the beginning of time, prior to the Big Bang, we existed in total and complete and perfect identity. So you can imagine nodes. Each one of us as a node being like a circle, okay? So imagine a bunch of circles representing our individuality, representing our nodal existence with it as the network. So imagine that all these circles were all on top of each other. Like say you're using Photoshop, and you know how if you create a bunch of circles on Photoshop, if you put all the circles on top of each other, it would seem like one circle. So you can imagine reality as sort of being that one circle, which is the absolute and total identity, which is one singular mind with the potentiality for multiplicity. So this singular mind then, in introducing diversity, diversifies itself into multiplicity. So basically you have a very, very, very basic reality, which is just a singular point of identity. But this singular point of identity decides to explore itself in diversity. And how does it do that? It diversifies itself into nodes, and it forms a network. It's always a network, and the nodes are eternal. However, in the state prior to the Big Bang, the network is a node of one, but it's not one, it's a one with a potentiality for many. So the nodes are always there, and the nodes always form a network, but the complexity of that network can be a singular identity or a vast multiplicity, depending on how it configures itself. So essentially, the absolute existed in identity, diversified itself into multiplicity by making its nodal structure a node of one to a node of a vast multiplicity of all Zedic minds. Anyway, goddamn CIA. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not, but it's very loud and very annoying. That tells me when someone is here. Anyway, what was I saying before I was interrupted? So you can see that it's similar, where the grand overarching idea is quite similar. It's the idea of this mental field that is exploring and exploring itself and gathering data through bodies. And there's a feedback loop of evolution, and the culmination of this results in apotheosis. So same thing on our side, except slightly more intricate. We are Zedic minds that are as a network using bodies to gather data personally, individually, and collectively. So the node evolves and the collective evolves at the same time. So there's a one and many rather than just being a one. There's a one and many simultaneously. There's a unity and diversity simultaneously because there's a singular network with a multiplicity of nodes all learning and gathering information and complexifying through experiences. So it says, this fact would influence the philosophy and culture of EBOs, resulting in a society that doesn't fear death, but which places no importance or reverence on individuality. So they don't fear death, but they don't put any importance on individuality. This belief compels them to seed life, shape it, nurture it, monitor it, and influence it for the ultimate purpose of creating this apotheosis. Paradoxically, they have little or no respect for an individual's well-being. So, very, very interesting. They're saying essentially that these EBOs want to nurture and create life so that it will reach apotheosis, which is very, very interesting because if you think about, again, this is also interesting. Now, this whole idea of having little or no respect for an individual's well-being, that's a little fucked up. Sorry, EBOs, but chill. That's not cool. But you can see our system has individuality and multiplicity as well. So we absolutely respect individuality within a collective. That's why, if you have a network, you want to respect its nodes. The network is formed by the nodes. But anyway, it's interesting that, they don't fear death because they look at bodies as being disposable, basically. And they have this idea of nurturing life so that it reaches apotheosis. So very, very interesting because that would naturally follow the idea of nurturing life from our perspective as well, is that when we reach a certain level, I won't get into too many details here, it would take too much time, but in our system, phase 3 of reality is holos independence, where essentially we evolve to the phase of a subnetwork mind and we create our own CFD or collective frequency domain. Essentially, we create our own dimension. So we get to a level where we are basically extremely evolved, and because of our realization of interconnection, we would want to help others evolve as well. So that's what it kind of comes to. Imagine that, see, this is sort of like the highest level on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, extended hierarchy, but in the cosmic realm, where once you reach self-actualization, you move to transcendence, and transcendence is the point where you're then helping others to self-actualize. So it would be like, oh, okay, we have evolved to a certain level and understand that reality is interconnected. So since reality is interconnected, it's in our best interest for the rest of reality to evolve as well. So think of it like this. If you realize that you are the network, you're going to want all your nodes to be the best they can possibly be, because the better the nodes are, the better the network is. So when you look at reality and you see all these nodes that are behaving in crazy ways, like humans running around killing each other or chopping each other's heads off and, arguing about whose sky daddy is the best, then you have a big problem because your nodes aren't functioning properly. So you're going to want to, help in some way. So it's interesting. Basically, what they're saying here is that they seed life and want to nurture life so that it can reach this stage of apotheosis. And it says they don't fear death. And what I'm curious here, it says paradoxically they have little or no respect for an individual's well-being. Now, I would be curious, like, again, let's play and for fun and say this is real. This is kind of what I'm doing. For fun, let's say this is real. If this is real, it would be, and I'll tell you at the end if I think this is real or not. I'll give you my opinion. But what could be interesting here is look from that perspective. Let's say that these are minds that are highly evolved, and they create disposable avatars, because remember, these EBOs are seen as disposable. They seem disposable and engineered for a specific purpose. So let's say these beings create disposable avatars and seed them on Earth in some way, or get them on Earth in some way, because they don't fear death. They realize, hey, we are eternal. And I'm doing a lot of my own interpretation here based on this information. But they're saying, hey, we're eternal. We're eternal minds. We need avatars to be able to localize on Earth for the purpose of helping the evolution of humanity. If they're benevolent, they could also be trying to influence humanity in a negative direction if they are malevolent. But I'm just playing along here. But see, that would be very, very interesting and fall in line with the fact that maybe it's their well-being that they don't care about, right? Maybe it's, oh, well, we realize these bodies, these avatars are disposable. We're eternal. Doesn't matter. Who cares? They're disposable. We're just, because the body isn't what's disposable. Or I'm sorry, excuse me. The soul is not disposable. It's simply the body that's disposable. But the individual says, please be advised that I'm speaking from memory of something I read more than 10 years ago, so take the following with a grain of salt. Also, I'm not a philosopher or an artist, so please excuse my struggle to properly formulate the concepts and my dry terminology. So I think that's interesting as well, is that he's basically saying like, hey, I read this 10 years ago. I'm not a philosopher. This isn't really my field. So it would be interesting, again, playing along, if this is real, it could be that he interpreted some things incorrectly, such as the loss of individuality might not actually be the loss of individuality. It might just be the loss of that particular ego, or, just little things like that. Maybe he got wrong. And he says, finally, note that this information comes from a document whose author was directly interacting with an EBO. It is not specified whether it was an ambassador, a crash survivor, or a prisoner. The means of communication were not specified either. Okay, so let's talk about this. So first of all, a lot of really interesting parallels. Very, very cool. Quite interesting. Very cool. And this document is very, very long. Most of the document has to do with like DNA sequencing and a lot of molecular biology that's pretty technical. It would be very dry to read it on stream. It's extremely technical. So you can certainly read it if you would like. So first thing I want to say about this is interesting information, very interesting information, because it has a lot of parallels with what we talk about. So is this real? I doubt it. I don't think so. I think it's bullshit. We don't know that it's bullshit. Of course not. No way. No. It might be true. It might be true. But here's the thing: when we examine things, we want to look at a lot of different factors here. So first of all, this was a Reddit post. If this individual had information like this, why would it be a Reddit post? I mean, I know he said because he wanted to have anonymity and still get it out to the public, but I feel like that there could be a more strategic or better way than making a Reddit post for this information. That's highly suspect. And the fact that, the account was deleted, like, yeah, okay, it could have been, the government got to him or something. But the post is still up. It's not like the post itself is down. So that's also a little, I don't know. It's a little suspect. And so basically, there's no real evidence to say this is real. It's a completely anonymous post that was put up there on Reddit. To believe it is really just a matter of faith. It's very much not the same as the congressional hearing, which there was extremely good reason to look into that, because you had 3 highly respected individuals who seem to have not much to gain and a lot to risk by doing this sort of thing. So that's a big difference. This is an anonymous post on Reddit. So now this doesn't mean it's fake. It could be real, but there's no evidence to suggest that it is real. So when we come across information like this, what it's good to do is it's interesting. We can go, wow, this is really cool. There's a lot of parallels and a lot of interesting things that match up here. That's really interesting. But ultimately, there's no evidence to say that this is true or this is real or or that there's something to back it up. So with this type of information, it's good to file it under, the sort of question mark box. Like, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even put it in the question mark box. I would put it more towards it's probably fake. It's probably a hoax. Now, again, we don't know for sure, but we want to always, use logic and reason, and the probability, the reasons to believe this is true is pretty low. But the interesting thing about this is that even if it's not real, regardless if it's real or not, we can learn from it by discussing it and drawing parallels. So when we come across information like this, it's interesting, it's fun, it's intriguing, but what we want to do is not believe it right away or make important life decisions on it, right? We don't want to automatically go, oh my God, EBOs exist. They're everywhere. I got to start telling people. I got to start, building my bunker. I got to start, etc. No, that's not what you want to do. What one wants to do is be like, okay, interesting, pretty sus, the way it was delivered. Doesn't mean it's not true. Interesting information. Let's look at it. Let's examine it. Let's talk about it and draw interesting parallels. But remember that we don't know if evidence leans more towards it being hoax than it does true. Doesn't mean that it's a hoax. Could be true, but we don't want to make important life decisions about it or anything like that. But we can still learn by discussing it, because when I read it, I was like, this is really cool. This is really interesting. This is great to talk about. But I've also done videos on, H.P. Lovecraft's god Azathoth. Azathoth is very interesting and has a lot of parallels to what we talk about, but is clearly not true. But it has a lot of archetypal truth to it. It has a lot of archetypal resonance to it. So this is stuff that's fun to talk about, interesting to talk about, and cool to draw parallels to. And it might be true, but we want to stay grounded in logic and reason and not get distracted by this kind of thing and realize, like, ultimately it doesn't matter. It's like, ultimately, so what? If it's real, so what? Our goal is that achievement of apotheosis and the collective apotheosis, and putting it in their terms. That's not literally the terms I would put it in, but it's interesting to see in a way where we can look at it and go, okay, well, this is probably fake. It might be true. We don't know. But regardless, what we need to do is learn, grow, and evolve. Because if it's true, that's what it would say to do. And from how we understand reality, that's how we know reality to operate in a very, very generalized way. So ultimately, my opinion is, if I had to make a decision, I mean, ultimately, I would say, I don't know. But if I had to make a decision, it seems more like it would be false than true. However, the information is very fascinating, very interesting, fun to talk about, could be true, and we can learn from it by diving into these stories. Just like we can learn from, reading Gnostic texts or reading, all myths and legends and drawing parallels in myths and legends and things like this. We can learn from it, and we can have fun, and we can use it for evolution and growth. But remember, we have to stay grounded. We have to use logic and reason. We don't want to get distracted from our true goal. And what's our true goal? As Neogenians, to create the new beginning. That's what we're here to do. And so ultimately, very interesting stuff. I'm curious what you think, though. Tell me in the comments. Do you think it's real? Do you think it's fake? And regardless, what do you think about the information? And I want to remind you, hey, if you enjoy my videos, like and subscribe. There's a lot more videos on this type of thing. I recommend checking out my playlist on the Law of One, the raw material, if you like this kind of stuff. And we're having a members only video all about, does consciousness defeat materialism? As we talk about, we're kind of going to expand on this and talking about consciousness or mind being the fundamental nature of reality and it destroying the idea this is a materialist world, as we look at, as I react to a video by a certain Dr. Dean Radin. Anyway, that's going to be fun as well. If you want to be a part of that, you can just support on Patreon. And you can get access to all our members-only videos. There's a ton of members-only videos and a new one every single week. You can access that by joining at any level on Patreon or tier 2 or higher on YouTube. And as always, I want to thank everyone who supports. Means a lot. And remember, don't feel obligated to support monetarily. You don't have to. I never want anyone to feel obligated or pressured. There are plenty of free ways you can support, like liking, subscribing, and sharing. But I want to give a shout out to those who do support because it does help out a lot and allows me to create bigger and better videos. Thank you to Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, DB, Enki, Nusalina, Paul, Eric, Fire, Masam, Ryan, and Christopher, and everyone else. Thank you very much.